Good evening, everyone.
To let myself go, to let myself flow.
Welcome to With Seamless Audio, Laurence Shorter's Spiritual Experience. Today, I'm going to be talking about life as art. And life has truly behaved like art with me, in that of my three guests, only one is remaining. At about 6:30, I learned that unfortunately, my first guest had to pull out unexpectedly. And then just half an hour ago, Jyotish let me know that he also unfortunately can't be with us tonight because of a family emergency. So fortunately, I still have joining me in a moment my my old friend and special guest, John Parkin. So we will be living and breathing life as art. Art throws you all sorts of unexpected, life throws you all sorts of unexpected things. Life as art is about accepting those shocks and changes and incorporating them. And I've got to tell you that it is an energetic business. I am still processing and adapting myself to the new reality, like a jazz musician, like a kind of inept jazz musician or a rusty jazz musician who's still learning the art of responding to the unknown. So I felt that was a good, in a way, a good primer for this event. I wanted to talk about life as art because, first of all, I care and love about art. It nourishes me in ways that business, self-help books, and even fantastic conversation doesn't. Something about art's depth and mystery touches me. And in that depth and mystery, I sense something of my own potential, my own nature, and I long for it, and I long for more of it. And so this time, I'm not going to be talking about lockdown or vaccines or the pandemic, unless it comes up, and it might well do in our conversation. But I'll be immersing in the question of how do we live our life as an art form? How might we live life as if it were art? And how might this world become as creative as it can be? And I would probably add to that, maybe I'm undercutting myself here, but I imagine a real artist isn't too concerned about the world. Of course, they'll have compassion and concern like the rest of us, but their job is not to change the world in the way that campaigners do, or even leadership coaches. No, I imagine an artist's job is to stick with the process at hand, which is to manifest something, to bring something forth which they're driven to bring forth. And in that, I see a way of life and a way of being that I long for. First of all, just a little bit about Laurence Shorter's spiritual experience. Why is this a spiritual experience? Well, first of all, I'm going to draw attention to my Natty logo. Yeah, there it goes. It's quite hard to point your finger at a virtual thing. I'm very pleased with that. This was made for me 2 years ago when I first did this show on stage in London. And the purpose of it then was to bring conversations onto stage, which I found most vivid and engaging from my coaching work. Not coaching conversations, but conversations in which I and others speak about the human experience in a way that is rarely seen on television or in what passes for spiritual discourse online. And I felt that spirituality was something I wanted to step up into, not because it was new for me. No, almost the opposite. It's as if spirituality, or feeling spiritual, or longing to connect with God or my soul or whatever it is, was something that I was ashamed of, and ashamed of talking openly about. God knows why. In a way, it's easier in this age to talk the New Age language, the language of holistic yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, than it is to refer to the divine. And so I thought, well, no, I'm probably, if I lived 100 years ago or 200 years ago, I just would have been a priest or a rabbi. There's no question about it. I'm not really fit for any other job, certainly not making dry stone walls. I wouldn't have made it in the army. I probably would have just been a vicar in a small town in Scotland or in North America. And so here we find ourselves, and that energy, the energy of the divine, is still runs through us all. And yet there's not much space for it. And indeed, there's not much space for anything in life that's not about doing. And so much of that doing is creative and wonderful. And yet there's a space for the divine that's not quite there. So that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to connect the human experience with the divine and the spiritual, and to let this be a space where anything can happen. And indeed, anything has already happened. And I would just like to, before I introduce my first guest, I'd just like to say that we may not use the word spiritual at all in our conversation, but for me, spiritual means the embodiment of our spirit and form. It's the embodiment of our soul in the world, in my body, in what I produce in my work and in my interactions. And that's why I'm drawn to people like my guest, who have made it their life to live creatively, to live in flow, and sometimes pushing against stream to live in a way that's the life less ordinary and the path less trodden. So I think without further ado, I'm going to invite my guest. I keep saying my next guest, my only guest this evening, although we may be joined later in the hour by my wife, who is an artist and an incredibly flowy person, and a sort of exemplar of the embodiment of the spiritual as soon as she gets the kids to bed. So my next guest is all about not taking himself too seriously. He's been an ad agency guy. He's been a Qigong teacher. He is a Qigong teacher. He's a dad, and he's the co-creator of a legendary retreat in Italy, which he created with his wife Gaia, who he met in an ad agency in the 90s. And he started teaching with his wife Fuck It workshops about 15 years ago, and then subsequently wrote a book called Fuck It, which was so groundbreaking that people still remember where they were when they first saw it. I actually remember where I was. I was in my friend Eloise's house in Crystal Palace, I think. I saw it on the table. I still have a visual memory of it. It sort of branded itself in my memory. It was groundbreaking. It created a new genre. It's been copied a dozen times. It's become a meme, a global meme in our world culture. It was so successful that I heard him say in a talk he gave that he felt sick with stress because he was so overwhelmed by the success, which was so fast and so unexpected. He now runs a thriving community based in Brighton, an online community. Please welcome on stage, cue cheesy chat show music, my very special guest, John Parkin. Come on, John, let's have you on. Hello.
Hey. I was walking on.
Thank you for joining me. We don't get to hug, we don't get to hug, but I thought that instead of hugging, I could just put you inside an Edward Hopper painting. I thought that might compensate.
That does me.
Yeah. This is, I chose this, by the way, because for me, it's a great painting of empty space, but we're now filling it. So welcome. I'm going to put us on to slightly bigger because on Facebook, we might seem a bit small. There you go. But I'll probably bring Hopper back in a minute. And I'm going to switch this around like that just because I can. John.
way. Hey, Laurence, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
You're okay, good.
Yeah.
I noticed that you look as if you're in a room where it's still daylight, whereas I seem to be in a room that's clearly nighttime.
Yeah, I'm trying to get your nighttime look. I can't do it. I don't seem to be able to. I think it's the camera I've got. I want to have those colors, but I can't get them. So I'm jealous. I want that look.
The answer is actually just an IKEA bamboo lamp.
Is it?
Yeah, and I put a bottle of white wine in front of it, which is probably staining the light a bit yellow. John, why don't you tell me, when you hear, to start off, when you hear me describe the inception of your book, sorry, not the inception of your book, the reception of your book and the impact it made, which you must have heard so many times and talked about till you're blue in the face, does it feel like ancient history, or is it still alive for you? Is it still vivid and real and important? Does it still live as a work of art?
It does. It's interesting, this the whole fuck it thing, because we're both creative people. That's what we used to be you mentioned the ad industry, and our instinct is to come up with loads of ideas all the time. So the fact that first book, which was, you're talking about spiritual, and I'm really happy to use the word spiritual and talk about spirituality, because the first book was called, not just because I am, but the first book was called Fuck It, the Ultimate Spiritual Way, and that was part of the juxtaposition that kind of worked. But because it did well, they wanted another book that also had Fuck It in the title. And then because that also did well, they were happy to have another book that also had Fuck It in the title. And what it allowed was our creativity to kind of to go, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything just because there's a need for another thing. This needs to come from us. It needs to come from a love of it. So it's like that was an incredibly creative challenge, which is how to keep finding new stuff. And now it's 17 years after we first had the idea and started teaching it. So to find excitement in new things to say around it is really is great. I mean, that's part of, I hope what we get to talk about tonight is the creativity that comes out of challenge as well.
Tell me a bit about that. Tell me a bit about creativity coming from challenge.
Well, I don't want to. It's interesting because when you shared with me the idea of talking about life as art, I started to think about what a kind of as a creative person, as an artist, what would it look like, my life? And I kind of go, well, no, it's rough, isn't it? A lot of life is rough. Well, art's rough, and I got into that whole debate there, and it's really come up for me that a lot of the creative stuff that I've done in the end has come out of difficulty. It's not the stuff that we were coming up with in an ad agency. That was all quite cushy, to be honest. You know, you're paid quite well, and you're working on fizzy drinks and tins of things or bottles of things, and it's a kind of particular kind of young creativity. Usually when you're in that, you're quite young, but the creativity I experience now is mainly out of necessity. It's like, whether it's okay, we need to work on this now, or we need to do something new, or whatever it is. So, yeah.
And I totally resonate with that, because I've got 2 small children, and all of my ideas about lazy guru and the book I wrote about being in flow all the time and doing nothing, and that's all true. It's still true, right? It's a kind of a version of fuck it. In fact, I was aware of fuck it, I think, when I was writing that book, although I forced myself not to read it because I didn't want to be influenced, believe it or not, which I think is a slightly kind of defensive move on my part. But it's all true. And yet saying fuck it, or saying I'm going to be the lazy guru when there's a child sort of screaming in your ear and it's 3 a.m, or you're having a conflict that's escalated out of control, with your partner, and you suddenly realize, oh, it's time to say fuck it now, or anything else that goes wrong, and life comes at you, doesn't it? It comes at you fast and hard, and especially in the last couple of years. I mean, it was already, hey, let's not forget that before COVID, we had Donald Trump and Brexit. They all overlap, of course, and then before that, we had, all the other shit that happened, and it's almost as if, interestingly, when I was younger, I got a freer ride. Like you're saying, you're young, you work for fizzy drinks, and you get paid well. And then as I've become more, I suppose, taken life on more, it's coming at me, and it's like, here, this is life. Have you seen Bridesmaids?
No.
Oh, it's a great movie. It's very funny, silly American movie. And there's one point where the heroine, she's the hero, anti-hero. She's so sort of self-obsessed, and this enormous woman who's a friend of the bride jumps on her and starts slapping her around the face and kind of pinning her down and saying, "This is life. This is life. This is life." Because it is. And so I guess my curiosity is, how do you maintain that when you're in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the pressure?
I want to stay in. I'm happy to linger here for a bit, because it sounds if that's what feels so true to me. And I do sometimes think about. I just wonder whether it happens to a lot of us that I don't know, maybe a relatively privileged upbringing, and then a relatively privileged slide into the world of work, and a relatively privileged movement in a variety of ways, even ending up in Italy, and then to be hit by life in a variety of ways that can. And I just remembered what's his name, Ian McEwan. It's Ian McEwan, isn't it? A fantastic author.
Yeah.
I went to a reading of his. Can't remember where. Maybe. Anyway, long time ago, 1990, I think it was, so 30 years ago. And I wanted to write. I wasn't really writing, but I wanted to be a writer. And he read out. I think he'd written a story with one of his sons, so it was a children's story. And I went up at the end of everybody was getting books signed. I went up and I was there as a 21-year-old. And I said, I was anxious about the fact that I was starting too late at 2021. And I said, look, I haven't really managed to write anything yet. I just want to write. I said to him, am I too late? Like a tennis player starting too late. And he just kind of scoffed at me, really. He goes, are you kidding? It's like, you got to live. You can wait for life. You can wait for life to happen. And that's kind of how I feel, really. It's like I didn't really get what life was that other side of life until relatively recently, really. And it's a really nice, the idea of life hitting you, and then to live creatively, then to face life. That's more an interesting artist's view for me.
I've got a really, really basic and simple concept theory about what constitutes creativity, not creativity, but what creates the conditions for it. And I'm going to run it by you, see what you think.
Yeah.
And it's so simple that it's either completely true or it's off the mark and it's oversimplistic. What I have discovered, I suppose, or experienced through just years of struggling to get myself into the state where I'm in that kind of creative flow, and it's so tantalizing because I know it, because you go on a holiday and you relax and suddenly you start writing poems, or creativity it shows itself in these tantalizing ways. until you learn how to have the discipline around it. And I know that professional writers and artists who succeed have that discipline. And there's a wonderful book that I always mention it, called Daily Rituals. And it's a collection of stories of famous people of all varieties, including scientists and innovators, and what their daily rituals were. And from James Joyce to Hemingway to Henry T. Ford, these guys and girls all they knew something about themselves. They understood. Truman Capote every day lay on a daybed and dictated. Yeah, that's how he did it, right? Wagner couldn't have any corners showing. Everything had to be round. Patricia Highsmith, who wrote Talented Mr. Ripley and all this, she surrounded herself by goodies and treats and coffee and cigarettes and whiskey, so she could get herself into that childlike mode where she thinks she was allowed anything. So there's this thing, and I think those who have mastered it, whether they're well known or you may be watching, you may do this, right? But there's this trick of fooling your nervous system into relaxing, so that the cortisol and the brainwave patterns drop down, and you go from, I mean, it's scientific. You go from beta waves to alpha waves. It's DHEA instead of cortisol. And when I can do that and I feel peaceful, just anything can happen. Now, the trick is, for some people, maybe I struggle with doing that just on a good day, right? So, because I'm so tuned in to the fight or flight, pass an exam mode that trained me up, right? So still, I clock in and clock out, 9 to 5, and that 9 to 5 is like a kind of, already it's like framed as being some kind of proving, and unlearning that is taking me a long time. And then there's the Jedi level where you've got that maybe, but then you're being like, things are coming at you, pandemic, children, conflict, money, all that, and you still maintain it. So here's the thing. Is it as simple, John, as settling and soothing your nervous system and your being, so that then whatever needs to come through will come through? Am I missing something, or is that the heart of the matter? Is it just about execution?
For us to just to understand the brief, well, in order for us to be creative, as in writing something or recording something, or to live creatively,
anything, in order to respond creatively to life, in order to make decisions well, in order to choose what you're going to make for dinner, in order to create your best work, whether that's artistic work or any other kind of work.
It's a really interesting question, and it is one that I debate quite a bit myself, because at different levels. I mean, if I just go into the creative process, the creative writing, let's say, process, or making, well, what I've mainly done is write or make music over the last decade or so. But not a lot actually of writing. I mainly do other stuff around it, but when I write, I tend to write in batches of a few weeks. But in that process, what I'm aware of is, well, I remember John Cleese talking about creativity. To be creative, you need to switch really quickly between the clown, which is what we're talking about, I think, and the lawyer, the barrister. It's like super rational, and then and my experience of that, I think, is well, I spread it out a bit. So when I'm writing a book, if I've got structure, I spend a lot of time developing structure, and then I have the moment where I can just be a bit more clowny when I write things. But I still, this is the bit, hopefully this is interesting, this bit. What I get when I sit there, let's say I'm writing a chapter on how to live creatively, which I suppose I have. I must have written quite a few like this. And I know I've got 2 pages to write, let's say, or 1,000 words or something. And when I sit there, just relaxing doesn't do it for me. So this is what I'm aware of, is I get more and more tense as the pressure of having to write it increases. I know where I am, I know what I got to do. And then creativity for me is like a release. I'm so desperately, what am I going to do? It's going to be not going to be work. It's not. It's got to be good. It's got to, all that's so stressful that the idea, it almost squeezes out of it. It's like almost launched out of that as a release. So then it's relaxed because it's, oh God, I've got it, blum, and there's the idea. And so that process is relaxing then, and I'm in flow, and it's like, whoa. But what's created that is the original tension. And now that does really interest me. And I can also think about how that applies in life as well. But so that's my creative process. I kind of need that thing where I kind of go, oh no.
It's fascinating. I would say there's probably a tipping point. And of course, this notion of, and by the way, I think we might be joined, we might be able to be joined soon by Narina, which is great. She's in the studio and she's in the green room.
Great.
I'll bring her on in a few minutes. But just to carry on with this thread, there's probably a threshold, because the notion of struggle as being vital, like childbirth, to the creation, and that grappling and tussling and struggling is important. But I think there's a threshold at which it becomes destructive, in that, for example, a person from a troubled household is going to have trouble creating it while they're still in that situation. You know, a kid, because the foundation is rocked. Yeah. In the same way, if there's a level of trauma in the held in the self.
Yeah.
And I'll just speak personally. I literally have learned that what I need to do in order to get to that state is make like Truman Capote. I mean, I lie down. Yeah. And when I lie down, I trick something in my system, and it's like, oh, okay. Now, and then it's almost as if you turn on a water tap. It's incredible. I have to wait long enough. I'm not going to bed. I'm not going to sleep. I'm lying there. And I'm not on my phone. I'm doing nothing. I sometimes lie on top of my hands, right? It's like it does something to stop the action impulse. And then it's like there's a stream. It just begins. And then, okay, now I know what to do. Even if I knew what to do, it's like then the river now here's the water, so I can flow it through. Yeah. So this is maybe just very personal. And I suppose what I'd love to know, and I'll bring on Narina after this question, but is how does fuck it? What part does fuck it have in that? And by the way, I do want to just point out something, which is that you sent me, I thought it was lovely, your latest project, which it would be lovely to hear about unmucking yourself. Yeah. And they muck you up, your mum and dad. And I just thought it was so funny and ironic that having launched a whole genre of books called Fuck It, having basically introduced the world, the zeitgeist, to the okayness of saying fuck in public.
Yeah.
You basically are taking a poem that said they fuck you up, and you're kind of like sanitizing it to muck you up.
Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, when part of a challenge, a creative challenge with the word, using the word fuck in the outside world, it's changed over the years. And I want to answer your question as well about that creative thing. But yeah, at the beginning, we couldn't use fuck in a bookshop or put it in a magazine or go on television or the radio. Now you can go on television and say the F word, and you can go in a bookshop and everybody's using the F word. But online, where you imagine there was all kind of stuff, porn and everything, so that's the place where you could go to be naughty and say things. It's turned on its head. So in the real world now, you can say it, do it. But online, I can't even say F with apostrophes. I can't say F asterisk K. I can't even say EFF. So it's and I say I can't, it means you can't advertise something. It means you get blocked in various channels. So we've faced that thing. So this project, which is mainly Gaia's, which is, it's about the adaptive mechanisms. And we've chosen this thing, the idea of unfucking yourself, because they fuck you up, your mum and dad, as you know, where that's from. It is truly, I think, I don't know whether ironic, but it's I get that. I feel that as we're doing it. I was reading that at school, all openly. So what was your, Laurence, what was your question around this process?
Let me bring on Narina, because she's patiently waiting in the wings. I'd like to, I'll ask the question again now, and you can think about it. So we've been talking about the creative process, and I'll be interested to hear what Narina has to say, because she's the most instinctive of artists. But where does fuck it?
Oh yeah.
Remember, I haven't read the book, right? Because I was too competitive. So where does that live in that? Is it still relevant? And if so, where does it sit in the journey of life as art and art as art? And my next guest, on that note, is a very talented artist and healer and intuitive. She's one of the most naturally gifted creatives I know, and with only a very small amount of time, she's able to, as a mum, she's able to create things that it would take me days of walking around the park thinking about. She's a very special person. She's my wife. Welcome on stage, Narina Shorter. Hi, Narina.
Hi, Narina.
Okay, fade out.
Hello.
Hi, John. Hi, Laurence.
The sound a little bit fuzzy, Narina. It's a little bit fuzzy. So if there's anything you can do to get close to the mic or anything like that, then great. Otherwise, we'll just live with it.
Sure. I'll see what I can do.
Don't worry.
How bad is it?
There's some white noise, there's some static for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
If you run downstairs, you can get my headset.
Okay. Shall I?
What do you think, John?
It's a little bit muffled my end when you're speaking.
Yeah.
Okay.
How are you doing, first of all?
How am I doing? I've just come out of bedtime. You were talking about...
How were the kids? How was it?
Yeah.
I didn't hear any screaming.
Yeah, I know. It all went well. They seemed to be in support of me coming on the show tonight. So it all went very smoothly, and they even went to sleep sooner than usual. So all good. But of course, I'm next door to them. So if there's a sudden scream, then we'll all know about it.
Why don't you stay here for a minute, and I'll run upstairs and do the gallant thing and bring you the headset. How about that? You guys, you talk amongst yourselves, and don't lose the viewers.
No. Hi, Narina.
Hi, John.
Laurence is asking me about, because I delayed answering his question about how fuck it works in the creative process. So shall I just, hey.
Yeah, this is the real world we're in. John's about to answer your question, my love.
He's going to be back on. That's it.
I know. It's so weird.
That somehow surprised me that Laurence arrived there. I'm not used to seeing people between Zoom on kind of different screens be able to go into meet each other. How's that?
Yeah.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's very funny. How's the microphone now?
It sounds very similar. It might be after you have to switch the on the settings, I reckon.
Okay, sure.
There may be a way.
Okay, let's hope Laurence can come back on and carry on the conversation while I do boring tech stuff. But you answer the question.
Here he is. Here he is.
All right, I'm back. So thank you for that. Yes, thank you, Stephen. Love the spontaneity. Yeah, this is Life as Art. Here we are. It's a mess. Or to put it in John Parkin's words, it's a fucking mess.
Yeah.
So, John, we were talking about, I think it's sort of, in a way, it's almost as if fuck it wants to keep slipping out of reach. Perhaps it's feeling slightly worn out from use and just wants to rest. But there's something still so potent about it. And so my interest is more essential, though, to the idea. I guess I'd like to understand if, and this may have even gone through my head when I sat in the front of the car having an argument with Marina a couple of weeks ago. In that moment, I thought, can I say fuck it? And I didn't know how to. So, if you wouldn't mind, for those of us who haven't read the book or haven't read it for a while, or have felt the connection with it but have dropped out of connection, what's the gospel, and how might that make life more? How might it make it easier to live creative or to live it as an art?
The answer from the bit that we're talking about, which is the creative thing, really makes sense to me, which is that, I was saying it's like there's a tension that then I kind of, to relieve the tension, I kind of have the idea. Fuck it is kind of the way out of this tense. And you were saying it, most of us as adults live in our left brain's beta frequency, producing the adrenaline and the cortisol, and like this in life. And it's like trying to work it out. And we're too like this. And the way to, I don't know whether the way to live is the opposite of that, which is kind of right brain, purely creative, purely in flow, just kind of soft. This is what I'm not sure about. This is what I'm really not sure. But most of us live in the tight left brain, and we need more of the right brain. And to me, and we used to describe it early on at the Hill 15 years ago, as when you say fuck it, you walk from the left brain to the right brain. So when you say fuck it, you go, this is not so serious. This doesn't matter so much. We're only here for a short amount of time on this planet. It's like, just, lighten it. It's not so important. Just relax. It's that thing. It's that movement in our being and that movement in our lives. So it was like discovering a jewel in a kind of lump of shit on the street when we first realized the power of this thing, because it's very unique, the language. And we've since found out, so the scientists have found out a variety of things that what happens when we say the F word or other swear words. But that aside, we were kind of going, well, this is amazing, because fuck it is really unique, because what it points at, that like just let go doesn't do, it points at the fact that when we're in this thing, it's painful and it's stressful. And when you say fuck it, you go, I don't want that pain anymore. I just want to be more here. But you have to have that strength to go fuck it. And so it's movement. It's a movement from one thing to another.
Yeah. And it makes sense to me also that you're a Qigong teacher and that there's no one shortcut. And I suppose again and again, hope for the one way that will work again and again. But as life is art, you're always improvising. And I think I would imagine that there are that we collect a set of tools to help us move from left to right brain, and that's, you know, that's the best we can do, right?
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, I think that's I think that's the trick for most of us, to have our, because we're mainly in the left brain, to have our tools to move. Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm kind of maybe behind that, or above it, whatever, is the idea that it's all okay as it is. You know, a kind of bigger thing, which is, well, maybe I'm going to spend it, you know, a decade in the left brain before I die, and I'm not going to lose it. You know, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be in flow, and that's fine. So the kind of bigger fuck it, the bigger, you know, spiritual thing for me is that it's okay as it is anyway. It's okay that I'm, you know, that this place is a mess, that I feel I can't do this or that. That's part of it. It's not that it's okay when we get to something. That's part of it.
Thank you. Narina, I've muted you because there's white noise still, but just when you want to talk, just unmute yourself, and then we can just manage the sound. No problem. I'm sure you're dying to come in, so please join.
Sure. What a shame that it's still there, but here we go. I'll try and make what I say worth the static. What really is interesting me in this conversation is the idea of the yes to mess, and when you talk about the fuck it versus just let go, there's something in the fuck it that's a lot more yes to the mess than just let go is. There's something that, like, in the direction of still trying to control, or still trying to aspire to being like a certain level of zen or perfection, that's in just let go, which fuck it doesn't do. It completely surrenders to everything not being how you want it to be and not enjoying it, and it sort of says yes to all of that. And the idea of the mess of life and mess, and there's been a bit of mess in me coming into the show even, all of that really it's been a theme of reflection for me recently, and how important it is to say yes to mess. And even the moment of creation, you know, in the beginning when God made creation, there was mess as a result of that movement of creation. Stuff came in that wasn't perfect anymore. Nothing was perfect anymore. You know, all of that.
On that note, Narina, I can hear Ferdinand crying. So mess is,
Oh no!
Yeah, mess is intruding. Please come back.
There we go. Okay.
Please come back.
Should I leave the screen?
Just don't worry. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it.
See you in a bit, hopefully.
Okay. So yeah, an
unusual
interesting situation. Sorry.
It's lovely what Narina says, the yes to mess, and I also I mean, it's interesting. She brings up the kind of, you know, the Christian idea of creation as well as of God. You know, the kind of the original creation. I love that was a bit messy. It's like, what does God first do? What does He create from the first day? Does He say let there be light?
Yeah.
It's like he says, "Let there be light," but like the light switch, the light was flickering, and it was at first a bit too bright. Then it was a bit too dim, and then it started flicking off. And then as God went to adjust the light, He actually gave Himself an electric shock, and went, "Fuck! When am I ever going to get this light right?" But by the end of the first day, God mainly had the light right. You know what I mean? That's kind of life. It's then the second day, God got back to work. And I can't remember what God got down to on the second day. But when He started work, it's like the light was still fucking flickering. And so He went back to the light switch, and he burnt himself again. He got another electric shock. So God started His second day of work really pissed off. But in the end, he got through it. He faced his challenges. Now that'd be a story. That'd be a creation story that I'd like to watch.
Now, did that just come out of you, or did you create that already?
That was just there, yeah.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, thank you. That's good. I was I was really starting to enjoy it as well. The kind of layering of like continual like chaos. It's starting to remind me of a Stuart Lee routine. But yeah.
Well, Stuart Lee is one of my heroes, actually.
So yeah, you look the same. No, I didn't say that.
It's true.
So where are we going to take this, John? I'm not sure what comes next. I feel that I might be missing on some. One thing that I'm very wary of that seems to is a danger when you talk to like-minded people, and why I also like to have people in a room who don't agree with each other is there's a kind of when we're all on the same page and we all agree with everything that we each say, and it's kind of nice. And then at a certain point, it's like, well, okay, we kind of know the answer. What now? And so I'm caught between feeling like, yeah, we kind of all know, we know what it takes. And it's the doing it that's difficult. And I'm caught between that and thinking, was there something else, a whole domain here that we're not aware of? And it might be something to do with compassion for others. It might be something to do with privilege and the privilege to be creative. I mentioned this in my last talk show. And, why is it easy for some and hard for others? I mean, does everyone need to be creative? Maybe the world is supposed to be stocked with only a few people who are creatively satisfied. I don't know. I'm just riffing, but
it's interesting what you said about privilege. I feel that a bit. I see some like comedians of my age. I mean, you're talking. Stuart Lee is. We are the same age actually, and he talks about a massive influence on him called Ted Chippington, who was a comedian who was supporting the Fall in the late 80s, who would just go onto a stage and just really take on the audience, and he talks about it really. Influencing him, and this is what I'm going to say. When I see professional comedians or entertainers of my age, and I see there's a kind of lightness that I would have experienced when I was just in the job of being paid to be creative. That's different now. So when you talk about privilege, I think a little bit about that, which is the comforts are there. I can just there and be silly, and I can be silly, and I can riff for ages. But what there is what I don't have now is that kind of privilege. The obligation is to feed the kids. The obligation is to pay the bills. The obligation is to reach this or to reach that or to make that happen, and to get over this and to get the reality of life, the stuff of life. That's the less privileged thing for me. And at that point, what is creativity? Because it's not this, we're talking quite a lot about this kind of defined thing of the creativity of like writing or making music. And I spend such a tiny amount of my time doing that. I've spent, like music, I go in, when I'm making music, I go to a completely different space. I probably spent 10 hours in the last 2 years making any form of music. So it's the rough quality of what the living creative that I'm interested in. It's whether it's the creativity of my granddad who was kind of making magnets or something in his shed, or it's the creativity of your family falling apart and trying to work out how to bring that back. That's living creatively for me, not the kind of narrower thing. And then it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely hear that, and I suppose maybe it's because my life has been rough recently. Just I don't think any rougher than the average. Probably less rough than the average. Look at me, with my floppy hair and my scarf. But it's been rough at times, very rough physically, emotionally, high cortisol levels, and something of a struggle for health, if not survival, given the challenges we've had with the kids. And And so I did that, but perhaps because of that, I still long for a life of creativity that is more towards that light end of the spectrum, where something in the letting go of I have to make a living. There's a struggly quality to the I have to make a living vibe system we're in, right? There's a buy-in that I see myself doing to the struggle. I mean, even look, let's face it, in the social media domain, it's a struggle to get cut through, to have your voice, and you can enjoy it, and it can be like a game.
Yeah.
And it can also tip over into being struggly and stressful. You know, am I buying into something that the freest version of myself might not? And I actually have these moments when, and I tell you, it happens more and more often. I'll be walking along in some kind of struggle to get into flow because I'm tired or whatever. And I'm like, do you know what? I don't know if I'm cut out for work. I just don't know if this body was designed to work like this. And sure, I can work hard because I do the dishes. I get up with the kids. I do these damn things. You know, I work hard. But do we need to struggle to make a living? Well, yes, of course, because if I don't, we won't eat. And yet, isn't there a turnaround here? And isn't there a bit of a fuck it in that? That can I just let go? Because my soul just wants to sing, or my soul wants to write music. Or I mean, like you, I had a band when I was at university, and I dreamed of making that my career, and I just haven't done it for 30 years. And the guitar, I still have the guitar sitting over there that I had for 30 years, and I don't play it ever. And I sometimes wonder, if you took away all the things, the ideas, you know, money wasn't an issue, universal basic income or whatever, I don't care. You know, it's like, oh, Bitcoin, you know, just like, would I actually bother doing much of what I do? Or would I just sit and poodle with my guitar? And would something unusual happen as a result of that? So I have to say, that's a question that I grapple with in my mind, not discounting the value of the rough creativity you're talking about.
I grapple with the same. I grapple with it, and I've been thinking about it this year, because of the amount of money that's come from in the end, from the taxpayer, from the state out into the world to subsidize living. The idea of I mean, does that question of if there was a universal basic income that allowed everybody to live a minimum level of comfort without doing the slog, what would it mean? What would it create? Not just in how we'd live, but just in your head.
See, we're getting a bit political maybe, but I don't think the universal income would do it for me, because I think you'd immediately have a gulf separating those who still wanted to get their hands on capital and accumulate fame or assets, you know, and then there'd be everyone else. So I can't see that as anything but a little dystopian. And for me, I don't think it would need to be more radical in a way. But even just as a thought exercise, what if that was all off the table? What if survival was off the table? What would you do?
I mean, that's where I start to, when I go in that place, I wonder whether I would be as creative. That's the problem.
I see.
Yeah, that's where I start to go into the loops, really, because I wonder how much of my creativity is as a result of the tension and the pressure, the kind of the necessity is the mother of invention idea. And I wonder whether, and this is the you know, we're talking about unmuck yourself, that work that Gaia does, the whole work is around when we're not nurtured properly as kids, we adapt to try to get what we need, or because we're not getting it, and then we carry on. Her work is about the fact that we all carry those adaptations into our adult life. And some of my stuff is through adaptation, is adapting. So it's really weird when you take something out of this, what's left? it's like, okay, well, if it could have been better, if the upbringing had been better, if that had been better, if we didn't have to worry about this and that, or if life just was a bit more straightforward like it was when we were younger, then we could just be creative. Then we could be. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure about that. I'm not sure, because it does seem to be for me that it's kind of squeezed out. Now, so it becomes a very interesting question. I had a quick flash of a thought today about, I used to teach creativity at Southampton University in the 90s, just as a kind of visiting ad guy. So I'd go into, be like, I can't remember, a few hundred people in the lecture theatre, and I'd turn up and say, this is how, these are some ideas for being creative, and this is what, in my world, this is what happens when you're really creative. It's a nice job, you can do this and that. And I used to get people really excited about the creative life, about what it'd be like to be a professional creative. And they used to come up to me afterwards and ask me a few questions, and then they'd say it just sounds amazing, the stuff you do. It sounds great. I mean, it sounds great. But do we have to come to London to do that? Is it not possible to stay down here? Because a lot of them were surfers, and they had a nice life. They were kind of happy and had a nice life. And I don't know. They weren't going to go to London. I don't think any of them went up to London and did the thing and went, And a lot of them are probably quite happy.
Yeah, it really reminds me of because I do a spiritual practice called Latihan, and there was a guy when I was 15, 20 years ago, and he wanted to join and do the practice, and I was telling him about it, and he had this one worry, which is that if he did it, he'd get too happy to write his books. And I was like, no, listen, don't worry, you won't, I'm not happy. Yeah, I'm still not happy now. So I think he did do it. He did do it, and he does it, and he's still writing his stuff. And of course, he still suffers all the time. But yeah. I mean, that raises a question: does anyone not suffer? I don't know. I think that regardless of, I mean, I love what you say. It's like a liberating idea. It's actually a liberating concept that I can let go of the fantasy that if I let go of trying to earn my bread, I would be free to create. It's a wonderful idea, because it's no, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe this is it.
It's a kind of horrifying thought as well as a completely liberating and gorgeous thought. And you asked a question about how would you were asking questions that I saw on the thing that you wrote up for this evening about how could we all live more creatively? How could we all have a more creative world?
Yeah.
And my kind of contrary answer to that is pretty much, isn't it the most creative world it could ever be? Isn't the massive fucked upness an astonishing invitation to creativity? Isn't the movement, like, we're going to come out of this pandemic, hopefully, with all this stuff stored. I mean, there's been creativity. I'm sure there's been people making sourdough bread and baking and shit like that. There's been that kind of creativity, but we're holding everything in. It's like, we're going to come out of it and go, wow, there's going to be the roaring 20s. There's going to be, hopefully, there's going to be new music and this and that and amazing theatre, because there's this thing going all the time. And so my sense is, it's like, it's always been the most perfect creative environment, the world. It couldn't get any more creative. It always has been so creative. Even the shitty stuff then tightens and then makes you go, ah. And I wonder whether that, I mean, it's kind of depressing, this thought, but also liberating to me, which is that my life, with all my kind of, I've got doing this again, I've got stuck in this again. It's like, why can't I just, but that's it. That's what I do. That's how I am. That's kind of life.
Yeah, I love it. I'm savoring it, and I'm even breathing it in, believe it or not. Like a true breather inner. I'd say that then it's about, and I have a final question, by the way, because we're at the hour. I'd like to ask a final question. I'd like to offer one example. I would love to hear a daily ritual from you, one of your favorite daily rituals. Before you do, I wanted to say that I think in that case, it comes down to, for me, acceptance, because there is still in me something that doesn't accept what I am, not as a human being, but as this isn't it, this isn't it. I will be a screenplay writer in Hollywood one day. Like, come on, I'm 50 years old, right? So like, there's still going on a kind of, and I suppose it's an immaturity of some kind. It's not, this isn't it. As what you just said, this is it. This is it. Marina's back. Just in time for the, we can go over 5 minutes. I'm going to stop me. I'm going to have a glass of wine.
I was going to say, am I here for the goodbye?
Well, let me summarize, and I'll wrap up and not wrap up, whatever needs to happen. But we had got somewhere which I thought was really, truly interesting. There was a bit of a polarization which happened around John's feeling that it was the roughness and difficulty of life that was the creativity, or spawned the creativity. And I'm afraid he's at it again, Marina.
I am the force of creativity. I bring static and screaming babies.
I'm so sorry. I really want to. Actually, why don't I go? Shall I go?
No, you host.
Okay.
I am the sort of representative of something significant to the theme of this conversation.
You certainly are.
Oh, yeah.
Mother, creative, colour, screaming, all of that. Enjoy the wrap up of the conversation. And
thank you for being with us, Marina. Thank you.
Thank you,
and
Marina.
Ferdinand, has his opinions, as you can hear too. Bye-bye, everyone. And thank you for inviting me on. Bye.
Bye. So, where was I? Yeah, wrapping up, and then I should probably go and help. This is the first time he's woken like that for days and days. Interesting. Something's in the field today. Something's definitely in the field. The disruptive power. Loki. Is it Loki, the goddess of cheeky destruction?
Oh, really? I didn't know.
The trickster. I think it's the trickster. Loki, the trickster. So what I was getting from you was this, out of this polarization of art and freedom and art and roughness and constraint, and that there's something liberating in the idea that we are actually living the most creative possible life at any one moment, and that this is the most creative possible world, because part of creativity is that struggle. And the intensity of what reframed it for me was, because no, I don't like to struggle. I certainly don't like to be in permanent struggle, which sometimes is how it feels.
Yeah.
But the idea that struggle is, and even struggle at its most intense and frustrating, is actually essential to the creative process, I think is quite beautiful. I still would like to, and this will bring me back to my last question to you about daily rituals, which I would still like to master the art of week to week, day to day, knowing myself well enough, like working with a complex machine or a flighty and difficult being, that I know how to treat myself so that I can move from the left brain to the right brain, so I can move through the struggle quicker, let's say, so that I'm not stymied by it. That's my hope for myself. And thank you for the reflection that this is it. This is it. John, I'd love to, on that note, hear from you one or two of your rituals that work for you. Yeah.
Thanks, Laurence. And by the way, the this is it thing it's always a two-handed thing for me. It's like there's opposite. I think it's like this, what you're talking about is the acceptance. It's like, this is it. But in the other hand, we're always holding the desire to be out of the struggle. So it's like, and that's what creates the thing. So having a desire not to be here doesn't preclude acceptance of being here. I know there's the paradoxes within acceptance are strange and wonderful. Because I can fully accept being in whatever, let's say any shitty situation I'm in now, I can be like, well, I am in this situation. There's an acceptance there, but it doesn't exclude the desire to be out of it and somewhere on a beach somewhere. And that is the holding of these two different things, the two sometimes opposite things, which I find really interesting. So rituals, it's interesting. I will say this, I'll give you a Qigong exercise, I reckon. Which represents some of what we've just been doing. And I'll tell you two things that I often do each day, one at the beginning and one at the end. So at the beginning of the day, I often wake up. I'm not a person that wakes up kind of going, way, it's a new day. so I wake up and I basically say what I'm grateful for, usually. So I am saying I'm happy, I'm grateful for the kids, that I'm grateful for Guy, I'm grateful for, etc., etc. That's how I often start the day, and I often end the day congratulating myself how well I've done that day. Even if I've not done very well, I just list stuff that I've done that I think, God, well done, well done, John. Look at what you did. You got through your list of 2 things. And you slept for 2 hours this afternoon. Well done. So those are rituals that I do that are really, really helpful.
And you do them almost every day.
Depends when, what mood I'm in. But when it's more struggly, I tend to do it more. Is the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they really, really work. And another ritual is often just trying to sit back and relax no matter what's going on. So slipping from the left brain to the right brain whilst I'm in the thick of the work of it, of the sometimes the struggle of the email, 60, 70 emails in the inbox, like, okay. And then trying to sit back and then try and enjoy that. So that's something I do. But I wanted to say this, give you a little exercise as well, which is this thing of tension and relaxation, the movement thing in an exercise. And this is originally a Shaolin Temple Qigong movement, and you can do it this way and you can do it that way. So it's a really nice thing, and I can also demonstrate it while sitting here. So it's makes it quite.
Can I do it sitting down?
You can do it sitting down. One would normally do it kind of just like horse stance or just standing up, but it's just as easy to do sitting down.
Horse stance is what, just with your legs slightly bent?
Yeah, legs apart and bent. So yeah, as if you're sitting on a rather fat horse. So it's basically the movement is pushing forwards and then pushing to the sides, pushing to the sides like that. So this one they talk about in the exercises as pushing the arse of an elephant in front of you. And this one, I imagine, what's his name? We're getting a bit biblical tonight, but Samson with long hair pushing the pillars of the temple, like this. It's like a real push. And so what it is, this movement here is a push. So it's like a breathing out, and it's like you can actually do movement. It's like, and this is a push. Yeah. And then back is really, so breathing out, and then as your arms come back in, it's breathing and everything goes soft. So it's everything in your arms is tense as you push, and then as you bring your arms back, everything is soft. The breath is soft, the arms are soft, all the muscles are soft. And it's the same as you go out. So it's pushing, or you can breathe, you can like do the, and then let the arms kind of float back in again.
Just
And
show
the
me.
same.
I don't think it's good TV us both doing it. Certainly not me doing it. But would you mind just doing it one time? And maybe it'll do something helpful to my brain as I'm processing screaming upstairs.
Sure.
And then we'll say goodbye.
Okay, I'll do it. And I'll also say this, that this works incredibly well for, and by the way, I talked a little bit, I'll say a little bit about this. I spent a lot of time with Barefoot Doctor, who is probably Britain's, leading alternative health teacher for many years. And he was a very good friend. And we spent a lot of time together talking about Qigong. And we talked a lot about this. And this, I would always share, this really is fantastic at getting Qi moving. So it's not just everything's gentle. Tai Chi is mainly gentle. The great thing about this is you block it all and then you release. And it's like gripping a hose pipe and then releasing it. So if you grip a hose pipe, everything gets clogged up. And then when you release it, it's a much better flow. And this is what you're doing with the energy of the body with this thing, which is, as I say, it's a Shaolin Temple exercise. And that's what I'm saying about life. So in life, it's at the flow, the kind of flow of the right brain stuff and the creativity for me is all the stronger when there's what's the idea? so this is one exercise, and it's a lovely exercise, represents that for me, and I know works, and we know, me and Barefoot, we really experienced that this works really well for generating and flowing energy in the body by blocking it and then letting it flow. So it's a real heave. It's like, and then a real soft. So it's a breathing out and then a breathing in. And I do that 8 or 9 times, depending on your favorite number. And then to the sides. And so you really feel the tension and the push as you do it. And it's good for your muscles in the end as well. And then relaxing as the arms come back in again. And just doing that and standing still for 5 minutes every morning would do everybody a lot of good.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go upstairs and start doing that in front of my screaming 18-month-old or something similar. John, I really, really enjoyed it this evening. I'm going to put us back into the painting. I'm going to move us around just for fun, because I can. And
I feel it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to, what should I play on the way out? Should I do the jingle again?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say thank you, Laurence. And I tell you something, and I hope it's the same for those who listen. It's through these conversations that we discover new stuff.
Yeah, and the language and the being of it. So thank you, John. It's a gift to know you. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for my guest, Serena. And I'll see you next time in a couple of weeks. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.